What in the world? Is this guy like a Pokemon king? Is this a church? The vibe is completely different. Because last time, it was like space and time. And now it's like religion and royalty. Like, I'm so confused. Like, we're just going at an exponential pace into like craziness. The next one is gonna be war.
Oh god.
I am once again sending my girlfriend on another Pokemon adventure. This go around she'll be exploring Univa, in the 5th generation of the mainline Pokemon games. In her previous journeys, she's had the opportunity to learn the complexities of this series from the ground up, but not without some strings attached. She's been Nuzlocking these games from day one, and after her star-studded success against the champion of the previous region, we'll be upping the ante in this one, but more on that later.
The professor's a lady! Oh my god, I'm so excited about this! She looks so cool! That's totally how I would look if I was a scientist!
The 5th generation marks some big changes and milestones for the series as a whole. Pokemon Black and White break plenty of the standard conventions established by their predecessors, and for better or for worse, are the black sheep in the series because of it.
She has a ponytail! Look at her shorts! I'm so excited! Yeah! I love her hair.
In terms of new Pokemon alone, they completely blow the previous games out of the water, adding 156 brand new Pokemon to their rosters, more than any previous generation, including the first one's 151. Along with that, there are several other unique quirks and rebalances that she'll be running into as she explores the region.
We're gonna get along great.
These titles mark the final send-off to the DS era of the Pokemon series, and she's about to find out that not everything is as black and white as she thought they were. With any Pokemon adventure, the first step is always picking out a starter Pokemon, and Gen 5 wastes no time getting right to the point.
I mean, I gotta say, I'm very over the moon about my starter being delivered to me as a present.
You don't even get to leave your bedroom without grabbing your first Pokemon and having your first battle, because by this point in the series, they figure you already know how this works. Of course, that didn't mean picking her starter went any quicker than it usually does.
Oh, it's a pig! What is this? A snivy? Is that like a little lizard?
I guess so.
It's cute. A little otter! Oh my god! An Oshawott? Oh, picking the starter was always so hard.
Just like in her last adventure, she was once again determined not to lose a single Pokemon this time. This has been a goal of hers for a while now, and she's getting closer and closer with each attempt. I wouldn't be surprised if she pulls it off sooner rather than later here, but for now, she's got some new stipulations to the rule set to grapple with that might throw a wrench in her plans for glory. The first of which we'll get into right away, which is the introduction of set mode.
Do I have to go to set?
Oh yeah. I forgot. Okay.
Oh!
You can do this, Taryn. I believe in you.
Set mode was something widely requested after her Pokemon Platinum adventure, and I think it's about time we took off the training wheels and see what she's really made of. She's not the new player she used to be back in Gen 1, and having beaten Cynthia without any casualties, it'll at the very least add a little more drama to her adventure.
I thought it was like I couldn't switch out my Pokemon if he has a Pokemon, like until he switches, then I have the freedom to switch.
No.
Wait, so what's set mode?
Set mode is when you knock out a Pokemon, usually it's like, he's about to send out this. Do you want to switch out a Pokemon? That doesn't exist.
That's all it is?
Yeah, that's all it is.
Oh.
So for this playthrough, this means that when an opponent's Pokemon gets knocked out, there isn't an option to switch out your Pokemon for free. This is a lot closer to how battling another human player works.
So I basically, if I do need to switch out, I'm just kind of on a back foot.
Yeah, exactly.
Along with this, the standard Nuzlocke rules still apply, which are that only the first Pokemon encountered in a new area can be captured, and any fainted Pokemon is considered dead and cannot be used for the remainder of the playthrough. Of course, we can't leave out the most important rule of them all, which is that all caught Pokemon must be nicknamed, which is something we won't have to ask her to do twice.
This is a tough, the thing is like, I'm like thinking about names, right? And I'm like, what would I name my little like guys, right?
So with that being said, has she finally picked a starter Pokemon?
It's like I see like little Oshawott and I just think of like, how can I not use him, you know? Then I think of little like Tepig and I'm like, he's so cute. He's wearing little like undies.
To summarize roughly 45 minutes of deliberation for you all, she'd almost immediately narrowed her choices down to Oshawott and Tepig. Sorry, Snivy. Her default choice was the Otter for obvious reasons, but having picked water-type starters for the past 2 generations, she was feeling like it might be finally time to go with a fire type.
Oh, I don't know.
In the end, it all came down to one thing really, and that was that she had better pig nicknames than Otter ones.
Okay, I'm going with the pig.
She's going with the pig, Jack. Oh, she commit. She went with the pig.
I went with the pig.
One of the things I've been anticipating the most about these games is they contain completely new Pokemon. I mentioned before how this generation completely dwarfs the others with the amount of Pokemon introduced, and that's for good reason. No past Pokemon are accessible in this game's main storyline until after the credits roll, meaning she has a completely clean slate with nothing but fresh faces to work with.
We're all gonna take our first steps into Route 1 together. 1, 2, 3! Route 1! We made it! Ah!
Not since the first generation has she been this much of a fish out of water discovering Pokemon and their typings for the first time, and it's for that reason I think this video will make for a great comparison to her original Pokemon FireRed playthrough.
I'm doing it! What's it gonna be? It's a Patrat!
Pretty early on in the adventure, the evil team of this story, Team Plasma, gets introduced to the player, and that's for good reason.
Pokemon Liberation? Okay, so he's a conspiracy theorist.
I shall come to see, they play a much more important role in the game's story than any team before them. They have confusing motives, only made more so by their actions contradicting their message.
Whoa! The only reason why he would need that many guards is because he's spouting crazy stuff.
But for now, my girlfriend sees them as another set of goofy-dressed criminals standing between her and her next gym battle.
They're so misguided. Yeah, strange guy. I'm not gonna worry about it, okay? But just tread carefully, because they clearly care a lot, even if it makes no sense.
I guess that brings us to the first gym battle of the game. And probably the first moment my girlfriend started to realize things worked a little differently here. Up until now, gym leaders have specialized in a specific type of Pokemon, and that's more or less the same here. But the catch to Unova's first gym is that it has 3 different leaders.
Oh, interesting. So he's like, what's your starter? And he's like, Tepig. And he's like, so you're working against water Pokemon. I think you need to prepare to face that type. So does he change just to be whatever week your starter was? Oh my god! What an interesting thing to do! And evil!
The first gym actually has a different typing depending on what you chose as your starter, and this completely blew her mind.
Damn!
Setting aside for a moment the fact that no matter which starter she picked, she was deliberately put at a disadvantage for her first major battle, there was also the fact that this was a Nuzlocke. She's used to relying heavily on her starter out the gates of most of these games, and now suddenly she's being asked to cover her greatest weakness with the Patrat and Purloin she found in the grass on the way here. Fortunately for her, the game has taken this into consideration and actually prepared a gift Pokemon that more or less solves the entire gym.
Ooh! She gave me a grass type. What is a Pansage? Yes, what does it look like? It's a green monkey! Oh my god!
Still, this first gym set the tone for what was to come, and made her doubt the standard formula that all these games have taken up until now. She'd come to expect how these games worked, and was now suddenly wondering what other conventions were going to be shattered going forwards.
I wonder what the hell the other gyms have in store for me. Whoa, that badge looks so cool! It's pink!
Technical machines have received an overhaul in the 5th generation, and are now infinite in use. This means that between battles, you can swap out a Pokemon's moveset with very few repercussions. This meant that the value of Pokemon who could learn a lot of different TMs went up quite a bit in terms of who she wanted as a long-lasting team member. Not to mention, she had all the more incentive to go out of her way and hunt down as many TMs as possible.
I found a potion!
Yeah, I love
So cute. I found it! She's so cute. Yeah! So sassy. What's her name, like, if I don't name her? Hilda? Wow.
The first TM from the first gym played a key role in her strategy in the form of the move Work Up. This move boosts your attack and special attack by 1 stage, and is a return to her setup strategies from the 3rd generation.
TMs are infinite? So all my Pokemon can get worked up? Ah!
Since she can teach Work Up to as many Pokemon as she wanted, and as many times as she wanted, there was a time where pretty much every member of her team that could learn it was running this move. Her basic strategy was to set up a couple of Work Ups on an opponent's lead Pokemon before sweeping their entire team with a Pokemon of hers that had a good type advantage.
Man, everyone was using cats and chipmunks and dogs.
Her starter Pokemon eventually evolved into the incredibly unique and never seen before Fire Fighting type, which is an all-around strong offensive type.
Oh my god, Wilbur wants to evolve! He's so cute! Okay, I'll let you grow up. I'll let you grow up. But look how cute he is! He just did his little sound! Oh, that's fancy this time. Wilbur's evolving! What's he gonna look like? Ah! Wilbur looks so cool!
There are plenty of things weak to either fighting or fire, so he fit right into her strategy. Pretty much the only thing that could threaten her was when a Pokemon could outspeed her. But her starter Wilbur also learned Flame Charge at level 15, a damaging attack that boosted her speed stat.
Then we're gonna do fire. I might only get 1 speed increase. Okay.
The usefulness of her starting pig was the perfect storm for him to rise to the top of her roster, and quickly made him the most threatening thing on the battlefield by a long shot.
Come on, Wilbur. A crit on the first one! Oh!
Oh my god.
Wilbur's a beast!
Nowadays, most Pokemon come packing something to hit their weakness super effectively with. This meant that having good type diversity on the team has never been more important. The Pokemon have a lot wider type coverage, so not many matchups are guaranteed wins. For example, most fighting types come packing a rock type move, so switching straight to a flying type isn't necessarily the easy win it used to be.
I'm trying to remember, how does Dirt and Steel do against water?
Dirt and steel. So water resists steel and it beats ground.
So we're gonna go out to our monkey. I mean, after the crazy shenanigans I have to do in Nuzlocke with you, I'm like, I have a grass type against water. This is amazing.
Yeah.
Like, I don't have to like be weird where I'm like, well, there's one Pokemon that's kind of like neutral to it, has one move that I can use against it. It's like, I'm, it only does 40, but at least it's something,
On top of that, with how many dual typing combinations there are by this point in the series, gone are the days of having one type that can handle pretty much everything. Back in the day, if you came up against something you didn't have an answer for, you could usually go out to your strongest Pokemon and muscle through it with your best moves.
Oh my god, they stole our Pokemon? That's so sad. No! See, these are the, they give quests to like motivate the player to go do things. This is what motivates me. It's like, have a little girl get her Pokemon stolen. I'm like, I'm fighting everything to get that Pokemon back.
In order to navigate the new hurdle of set mode, she doubled down on prep before major battles. This meant always having at least 2 answers to a Pokemon type. If a water type came out, she wanted a grass and electric type move to counteract it with. If something steel was on the field, she'd have a fighting type, but also a ground type in reserve too.
All I'm seeing are chipmunks. And Seek, like, we got this. And Oshawott and Wilbur are working together. Ah!
Thanks in no small part to how TMs work in this generation, she could change her movesets on the fly and really make sure she had her bases covered ahead of major battles. This brings me to one of the major power shifts that occur in the 5th generation.
I will say something that's nice is like, because even though these are all new Pokemon, because there's only a certain number, I'm seeing them repeated, so I'm like really getting a good memory of like what their types are, because it's not like I also have to remember like 3 other gens that kind of get thrown in, and I'm like, was that from 2nd gen or 3rd gen? Like, it looks like it's green, but like it's actually this.
The once powerful and mighty Psychic type is long past its heyday in Unova, and its usefulness has taken a steep fall off the edge of a cliff. Having caught a Munna in the Dream Yard, my girlfriend was excited to have a Psychic type so early on, but quickly realized that having one was much more of a liability than a help. With the abundance of Steel and Dark types, sending out her Psychic type to knock out a tough opponent wasn't the go-to strategy it used to be.
Appreciate liars. Can you hear my song?
No, I just know the song.
Even the fighting types were a threat thanks to having access to dark and bug type moves like Payback and Ecstasy. Unfortunately for Munna, that meant her usefulness was limited to catching other Pokemon since all she could do was put things to sleep using Yawn. It wasn't long before she cut Munna from her roster and replaced her with something more useful in battle. The irony being, it was probably something Munna helped her catch.
Well, I'm already confused. Everyone is confused. I'm confused. He's confused about me being confused. We're all confused.
If it wasn't clear from the first gym, by the second, it's practically spelled out for her that the gym leaders in this game have a lot more personality than previous ones.
Very strong and kind gym leader awaits. Oh, I love that. Lenora, and she's his wife! Oh, so he runs the museum and she runs the gym. I love that.
Something I always liked about these games is that the gym leaders aren't just boss fights sitting in a room waiting for you to show up. They're actual people that interact with the world and help you along your journey. With only a few exceptions, most gym leaders you meet in some way or another prior to your first battle with them in their gym. That meant she had more opportunities to form connections with them, and even had some extra time to figure out how she might go about facing them herself when the time came.
Oh, I love her apron and her pants. And she's wearing heels.
I could tell my girlfriend really liked these gym leaders because she actually called them by names in this one rather than things like the bug guy or the grass gym leader.
No, Berg is like, you are not messing with her.
Encounters in this game are a lot more limited than I personally remembered them. Early on, we were trying to decide what should constitute a new area as per the Nuzlocke rules, and settled on the banner that appears at the top of the screen dictating when something was considered new.
So I'm basically going to count anytime there's a new banner up top, that's going to be a new encounter. So there was not one when I came into the... Yeah.
Looking back at it in hindsight, I think I would have her do it differently because plenty of areas are divided into multiple encounter tables, but all under one singular banner. So for instance, her Pinwheel Forest encounter was found outside the actual forest and the tall grass leading up to it.
Oh, there's a Pokemon down there. What the, I want to know what it is. What is it? I don't get to keep it, but like, what is it? Oh, I could have found a little Pansage out in the wild.
This meant she missed out on a lot of the potential Pokemon who appear on the inside's encounter table.
To secure liberation of Pokemon, we will steal Pokemon from trainers. This messaging makes no sense. How is stealing freedom? Ugh!
Aside from that, there are also the special encounters like Shaking Grass and Dust Clouds in the caves. These also have separate encounter tables, and if you don't know the tables from experience, they can limit the scope of what you can encounter in a Nuzlocke.
Ooh! What is this?
Mr. Rossetti.
Mr. Rossetti! That is 100% Mrs. Rossetti.
In the grand scheme of things, she ended her playthrough with about half as many Pokemon caught as she's used to, and with more new Pokemon added than any previous generation, that feels a bit silly. I think being strict with what was considered a route was to blame, but that didn't stop her from ultimately building a tight-knit team of Pokemon. All in all, Nuzlocking is entertaining for all of us, but I still want her to have fun with these games. Part of the fun is allowing her to meet a variety of new potential team members.
Oh, interesting. A Venipede. Bug is strong against ground. I guess I'll just go out to Wilbur because fire. See, rocks squish the bugs, but the bugs can burrow in the ground.
Castelia City is where the game really sets itself apart from the other Pokemon games.
Oh my god! But, how? What? And why does the guy who uses bugs live here?
No town or city in a game thus far has been as massive and overwhelming as this one, and she felt its magnitude from her first steps inside of it.
But I don't want to wait. I just found my way here. Your city's very confusing.
Similar to how I felt as a kid walking through the busy streets of this place for the first time, she felt so small and lost in between the giant skyscrapers.
I keep running into every single light post. You'd think in a big city I'd have more room.
This goes back to the notion that Game Freak wanted us to feel how we did when we were new to the Pokemon world. This city and the way it intimidated her illustrated that idea perfectly.
Like, was this the angle that we've been using in the other cities? Like, how is this suddenly so cool in this one? Someone else is using the Pokemon. Excuse me? There's never a line!
As intimidating as the city was, the gym was pretty light work thanks to it being a bug type one. Her fire type made light work of the gym, and she kept on pressing forwards to the next city. By this point, her team was sort of an ensemble cast of Pokemon, and the only real staple members were Wilbur the Pig Knight and Mrs. Rossetti the Drillbur.
Hell yeah, I think he looks fabulous. Cute!
These two were both physical attackers with good move coverage, and even back then I could tell they had permanent spots on her team. The next gym was an electric one.
They're threatening the daycare! That's where all the Pokemon go to rest and play! This is illegal!
But before she could challenge it, she was approached by N.
Oh! This guy again!
And learned some interesting revelations about his role in Team Plasma.
He's the king of Team Plasma!
After defeating him in a battle, she took on Elisa and her electric type, thinking it would be just as easy as Berg thanks to her ground typing.
What? That's evil. It's so funny. I did not see that coming.
Unfortunately, Elisa uses electric flying types, which meant she had an immunity to ground. But ironically, that created a weakness to rock and steel. Mrs. Rossetti had both Metal Claw and Rock Tomb for attacking moves, so you can start to see how she was proving her worth on the squad.
I'll probably take one more. So I could do one more and then heal up. Oh!
That was close. That was a crit.
That was a crit!
Oh, yeah, you probably want to heal.
Hyper.
Of course, that didn't mean there weren't a couple of close calls along the way.
Another crit! Healing. Ms. Rossetti!
Not to get too ahead of myself, but around the time she beat her 5th gym leader, Clay, she was starting to notice that some of her team members were falling off more than others.
So a dark type would be really good, an electric move would be really good. So that's kind of what I'm on the lookout for. So I should have some encounters coming up, right?
The elemental monkey she'd gotten had fallen way behind, and it didn't help she'd missed the evolution stone in Castelia, so she was still rocking a first stage evolution. After finding out the next gym would be flying, she took a look at her roster and figured out which types would be nice to add to her team. The good news for her was that plenty of new encounters were around the corner.
What? That Pokeball just bounced in the grass. Oh, was that little guy disguised as a Pokeball? That's hilarious!
And the next cave had plenty of good electric options she could encounter inside. The bad news is she didn't find an electric type.
Ooh, what's it gonna be? What is this? Is this grass steel?
That's grass steel.
Oh, interesting. Is that quad weak to fire?
She did manage to catch an ice type on Route 6,
Oh my god!
but she was really in the market for something more reliable to deal with her water weakness than her grass monkey. Arriving in the next town empty-handed with no electric options to be found had her wondering if her next best bet would be to use Rossetti to throw rocks at the birds once again. Thankfully, before taking the gym challenge, she had to climb the Celestial Tower, and on Route 7, fate handed her a new encounter.
Oh my god! I got a zebra!
This was just the Pokemon she needed to completely sweep the next gym battle.
Kieran got super strong because I cleared like the entire tower with her and this entire gym with her. This one is sassy. Can this guy like evolve into two different things?
The male and female look different.
Oh. Oh my god, so the males are more colorful because that's how birds work? That's cool.
She gets it.
I get it.
And with an Ice-type gym coming after that, things were definitely looking up for her and her Pokemon.
Oh, I love this version so much.
This version, like Gen 5?
I love Gen 5 and I love Pokemon Black.
Now seems about as good a time as any to talk about how cool and creative the gym layouts are in this game. I already mentioned how much personality the gym leaders all have, but that is also expressed through their gym designs.
Wow!
These gyms are some of the best in the series, and I feel bad that it took my girlfriend playing through the game and having so much fun with them for me to realize that for myself.
Structure of a locomotive, it's a train! Yes! I love clues!
I can't tell you how many times she went back through the cannons in the flying gym or around the circles on the roller coaster gym just because it was fun.
Am I going through security? I'm being cannoned around! Ha!
For all the praise she gave them, what she doesn't even realize is that these games' sequels, Black 2 and White 2, all have unique new puzzles and fresh takes on their layouts as well.
I just smacked right into the wall!
All of this is to say, it was really rewarding to watch her having so much fun with this game. Firefighting is basically an ice type's worst nightmare, so you can imagine how easily she beat Bryson and his ice types.
Well, I'm ready for the next guy. We already knew Wilbur was gonna sweep. The thing is Wilbur got like 3 levels just on the way here. Yeah.
It's probably now I should address the elephant in the room, or more so, the boar. Overleveling her starter has been a curse I've done my best to ward off since the early days of making her play Pokemon. The whole reason we introduced her to the series with Nuzlocking as a rule was to avoid the pitfalls of power leveling a starter, and yet here we are now victims of our own creation. Overleveling in this instance was a symptom of set mode of all things. Allow me to explain.
See, that's the thing. This is why Wilbur's so high level, because he's good against everything.
To burning or punching.
Yes! and I can't help it.
Leading with a strong and reliable Pokemon is textbook Nuzlocke strategy. You always have the opportunity to pivot from an overwhelming danger, but having your bread and butter answer to most threats is never a bad thing to be leading with. The problem with set mode is that she felt like she never had a good opportunity to switch out. Swapping Pokemon always felt like a step backwards, and it never feels good retreating when you have momentum in a battle. In previous games, if a rock type was coming out, maybe she'd switch Wilbur out for a water or ground type, but here it just made so much more sense to stay in and click arm thrust again.
I don't know either. It's like, because I'm in set mode, it's like highly inconvenient to switch. So I just try and like have each Pokemon be able to do as much as possible.
Add in the fact that there was a genuine fear of moves like Pursuit keeping her from wanting to change Pokemon, and you can see why her team had been so narrow up until this point in the game.
The cat has like Pursuit, and the dog has like everything has Pursuit. And Retaliate, yeah. So this guy, you don't want to like put someone else out. You just want to get him first try because he retaliates if he came second.
She'd had some standouts for battles like Broccolini the Monkey or Kieran the Zebstrika, but these guys weren't seeing much use in between those major battles. So far, it really felt like Wilbur and friends, especially since fighting was such a powerhouse against all of Gen 5's Dark-type Pokemon.
You know, I didn't know. Like, I just kind of always pick based on like what I want, right? And so with Chikorita, I didn't realize that actually kind of put me on a back foot a little bit. Like, she was kind of one of the tougher Pokemon to start with. Because I think the first gym was fire, maybe? Flying, yeah. And so in this one, I'm like, I feel like I had the opposite where I was like, damn!
The unfortunate reality is that Team Plasma especially has a ton of dark and normal types, and that just happened to be Wilbur's specialty. Since they show up several times between each gym battle, the process fed itself, so to speak, and Wilbur just kept snowballing out of control.
I've been fighting these same 3 Pokemon since the beginning of the game. And the best way to deal with them is fighting. So I just keep using Wilbur. And so Wilbur is like a fucking god because I have to fight 10 million little plasma grunts every corner.
The good news is it was right after the 7th gym where she realized this herself and decided she needed something to change.
Whoops.
She insisted on having her team going into the end of the game because she knew better than to put all her eggs into the starter basket. Wilbur was carrying her hard, but the reality is he was 1 crit away from sinking her entire playthrough.
Good luck with that, lad. What? Is Takedown a dark move?
So after doing more story stuff and finding out the next gym was Dragon, she went on a hunt to track down the new encounters she could get with Surf, as well as building out a more balanced team for her inevitable showdown with the Elite Four.
Yeah! He's like, Tarny, I have to return to the champion. But once you defeat this gym, come and find me.
Setup strats were something she learned all the way back in Pokemon Emerald, and since she was limited on her ability to switch out Pokemon, they became a crucial part of her team building here in Pokemon Black. She'd leaned heavily on hard-hitting physical attackers that could learn Work Up and other stat-boosting moves. But one thing was clear, she needed a strong defensive option. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you all to her new favorite unshakable wall, a Pokemon who stands next to the likes of Bronzong and Geodude in her heart. That being Metagross the Ferrothorn, who's hard to hit and hurts to hit.
Let's go Metagross.
Along with his steel typing, he came with both Iron Defense and Curse, allowing him to bolster his defenses and even raise his attack power if needed to hit something back.
I got a grass type.
That is, if he even needed to. The best part about him is undoubtedly his ability Iron Barbs.
Nice Iron Barbs. Damn, and the Rocky Helmet's so good.
Which lets opponents chip away at themselves while he's setting all of his defense boosts up. He's the perfect Pokemon to pivot to when something spooky comes out in set mode, since he doesn't just take hits well, but does damage back.
Damn, that was a crit.
But that's not the only new member added to the squad. The real linchpin of the whole operation was this little Axew she caught in Mistralton Cave.
It's so cute!
When she first caught Hatchet, she added him to her team in preparation for the Dragon Gym ahead of her. But she only realized his true potential when he eventually learned Swords Dance. Given the right circumstances, if she could set up 1 or 2 of these in a fight, she could cleave through pretty much any opponent's team like a hot knife through butter. Add in the fact he could learn TMs for things like Shadow Claw, Brick Break, and X-Scissor, and this guy could easily take out any threat that hit the field.
Bye, Shimmy.
As for the 8th and final gym, Fracture took a backseat in favor of her Ice Cream Cone instead. If there's anything you pick up on in these games over the years, it's that dragons are weak to ice, and Ice Beam makes a complete joke of any dragon type. With how many trainers were spamming Dragon Dance and the like on the way to the gym leader, she felt like taking a turn to set things up was not the play with this one, and instead opted for the safer route to victory. Of course, that didn't mean there weren't a couple close calls along the way, though.
Come on, Froyo. Okay. He got the frozen off. Yo! Wait, he thawed out. Damn it.
Wow. That's lame. 5 HP. What the hell?
Before we go any further, I just have to take a moment and compliment the soundtrack of this game. The music is far and away one of the best parts of this generation, and I never appreciated it enough as a kid. All the themes in this game are phenomenal and never get boring, no matter how many times you hear them. For as many Team Plasma grunts as they have you battling one after the other in this game, she couldn't complain when their battle theme was such a bop.
I'm so into the Team Plasma music, though, I gotta say. It's so intense. Ba, 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 ba.
The dynamic soundtrack during battle stands out in particular, and was something my girlfriend kept circling back to talk about. The way the whole song would change when a Pokemon's health was in the red and in danger, or when a gym leader was down to their last Pokemon, took the stakes of these battles to the next level, and I wanted to make sure it gets the attention it deserves.
This is so confusing.
For them.
I know!
For you, it's fine. There you
Oh!
go. There you go.
What a weird
Isn't it
gym!
cool, though?
That was so cool. I cannot wait for Hatchet to be that.
I can't believe he can go to 5 HP.
5! Good lord. Oh, I have gray hairs after this gym.
With the final gym battle out of the way, there's just one thing left to do before taking on the Elite Four. Or is there?
Everything likes to talk to me right after a gym battle in this one, and I'm like, no thank you. Yep. At least it's Univa this time.
As my girlfriend approached Victory Road, she stopped me and was like, hey, wait a minute, where the hell is my legendary Pokemon?
But basically these two dragons, they used to be one dragon, but there were two heroes and they were brothers. But one of the brothers, they had different ideals, and so the dragon ended up splitting and like siding with each brother.
It's true that since Gold and Silver, these games have worked a legendary encounter into the main story in one way or another, but like its first gym battle, Unova is full of surprises. Not sure what to assume, she continued climbing to the peak of Victory Road and prepped for her showdown with the Elite Four.
Like, do I really have to go get the legendary Pokemon and fight the Final Four, the champion, and end? Like, I think I'm just gonna stay here and float.
Unsure of whether she'd be facing the champion or N as the 5th fight in the league challenge, she did her best to prep her team.
Yeah, what the hell's wrong with that? The doctor is using heal block. I hate it here.
With her team all trained up and ready to rock and roll, she stepped through the gates ready to become the next champion and put Unova behind her.
Oh, this music is so good. Oh my god! Shit! Miss Rossetti!
Imagine losing a Pokemon to a girl that just woke up. After this whole game not losing a single Pokemon, that's how she loses Mrs. Rossetti. It's a damn shame, but in the grand scheme of things, that's a new record for how far she's made it without a casualty. I wish we had more time to mourn, but some really big things are about to happen for the story before we have our next battle.
Uh-oh, the champion lost to N. No!
Yet again, these games break from tradition, having the evil team be the final showdown rather than the Pokemon League.
I was just trying to become the champion!
Once again, the gym leaders demonstrate why they are the best this series has to offer by actually helping fight back Team Plasma, rather than just hanging out in their gyms and leaving it all to a child.
I have to fight all of them? No! I haven't got... No! I just beat 4! I beat the final 4! Also, they're told... Can you manage that? Who's this now? Yo! Clay! Still standing, are you, Tiny? I did not expect Clay. Yeah, your drift fails. Ain't just me. Oh my god, all the leaders are here! And they're gonna help me! This is so cool! Thank god, there's finally a gem where, like, all the, people of power in the actual, world that I'm in, you know, want to do something about it and don't just leave it to a 10-year-old.
With Team Plasma's castle now being the backdrop for her final showdown, she was relieved to find she actually had access to a PC and even the ability to leave before her final fight. Usually the league challenge is an endurance match, but this time around she gets to fully heal up, which was much appreciated. It also gave her a chance to assess the damages and figure out who she might bring along instead of Miss Rossetti. After going over her options, she decided the thing she'd missed most about her Excadrill was her ground typing, and Sandile was a great alternative that had been waiting for a chance to shine from the safety of the box for her entire playthrough. This little guy is a ground dark type, which means he has immunity to both electric and psychic attacks. She didn't know it yet, but this little guy was N's worst nightmare. With that all out of the way, it's time for the real final battle of the game.
I'm very confused and more than a little disturbed.
Or at least what she thinks is the final battle. However, she still had one more question for me. When does she get to catch her legendary Pokemon?
Yo! Oh my god! This stream is so cool! Wow! Ah! Oh my god! It's so cool! I love it! They're just standing there like when they follow me around in Heart Gold and Soul Silver. Menacingly! It's such a cool Pokemon! I can't afford to have anyone else get hurt. Yeah! Rushram's mine! I have to think of a name! Thank you for your service, Herman. Damn! We just like came at each other. Oh, I'm nervous! I have to save the world, Nick. I have to save the world. The world is at stake. Go Milk! That's so cool that it just automatically put... Oh god, okay. Ooh. Okay. So I'm gonna go to my ground type. What is a fusion bolt? Yo! That sounds like a really scary electric move. I'm hitting him physical. He's a tanky boy. Yo! But Fusion Bolt's electric, right? Okay, so Hatchet resists electric because you can't zap the dragon. I'm setting up on their legendary. This is only mostly terrifying. Okay. That is a terrifying move. Okay, okay. And then I'll heal, and then I'll take him out. Avoid it, okay. Nice, good work, Hatchet. Yeah! Yeah! Good work, Hatchet. Nice! I'm doing this for Miss Rossetti. What the hell is this thing? Oh, fighting strong against dark. Holy shit! Hatchet! Hatchet's my hero! Nile was my hero. He made all of this happen. Who knew my dragon sweep would not be using Dragon Claw? It would be using Brick. No! Okay. Okay, let's just get him out. Oh my god! That was the last guy! I won! Oh my god!
After what she thought was a sweep on the champion and final battle of her adventure, the game breaks conventions one final time by throwing another curveball at her in the final hour.
Gets this. After all of that, do you think you're still worthy of sharing the name Harmonia with me? What? You good for nothing, boy. Am I about to have to fight Getsus? Is he the real, like, final villain? Am I actually fighting Getsus now? I thought I was done! What the hell? No! It's literally back-to-back battles! Oh my god! Whoa, it's very dramatic. That was good. I dodged the toxic. Okay. Let's do it. Let's do another fusion flare. Okay. Oh, okay. So this is Milk's like signature move, right?
Yeah, that did quite a bit.
That did quite a bit. It's damaged by the recoil though. I go first. Okay. That was a crit. Oh god. And I'm slow. Yeah. I'm sorry, Titanic. I wish that the curse body would work on that. I feel like I would outspeed. I mean, it's a giant toad. Rain dance. Okay. That's great. Okay. Oh god, okay. Oh. No!
Okay, pause. Hydreigon has a base speed stat of 98, and Haxorus has a base speed stat of 97. Had she gone for a Dragon Dance on the Palpitoad instead of a Swords Dance, she'd be able to outspeed him, but hindsight's 2020, and she had no idea this thing was coming. Sitting back and watching this fight, I knew that unless she played this correctly, this thing could very well sweep through her entire team. Ironically, the very thing she'd been doing to her opponents, the entire playthrough was about to happen to her.
Because I can't afford to like try and like live it to get the speed up.
You have to hope that 2 levels and higher base speed is less than the effort values you've gotten.
Not taking into account individual values, effort values, and natures, for all intents and purposes, Haxorus has no chance of winning this matchup. With all that said, the girlfriend has never given up hope in the face of defeat.
No! 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 Hatchet. Hatchet. Fuck.
Yeah.
Unfortunately for her, this thing just took out her fastest Pokemon. On top of that, it has Surf, which can hit her 3 remaining Pokemon super effectively. Completely out of options, all she could think to do was send out her legendary Pokemon. Hydreigon had the level advantage and the better typing, but her fate was more or less sealed as soon as she lost her Haxorus. All she could do was click on attack and pray for a dodge or a crit or something to turn things around.
There's the para! There's the para!
Wait, there's hope.
Okay.
There's hope.
Oh my god!
Never give up.
Never give up! I thought I was gonna wipe there. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Somehow, we're getting our momentum back. Moxie, you get an attack.
Yo!
Attack boost, Moxie.
Yo! Moxie boost! Come on now. Okay. Okay, come on, Niall. Come on, Niall. Come on, Niall.
I think he's gonna
Come
do
on,
it.
Niall.
He's gonna-
Oh my god!
That was so cool. Oh, he's Moxie boosted.
He's
there.
Moxie boosted!
Oh my god, that the paralysis.
The paralysis!
That's what Pokemon is all about.
Oh my god!
She may not be the greatest Pokemon trainer of all time, but she sure is the most entertaining one.
Glad we took that crocodile with us.
Me too! That crocodile saved my life!
That crocodile came in clutch.
Niall!
There's no champion title or Hall of Fame at the end of this journey, but after a battle like that, I don't think it needs one. Those things aren't what makes a champion anyways.
I did it!
You never gave up.
I never gave up.
And that's what a real champion.
Oh!
She more than conquered the Unova region and proved her mettle against its toughest challenges. I can't wait to see what her next adventure has in store. But until then, farewell.
This may be my favorite one so far.
Really?
Yeah,
That's awesome.
I've really appreciated all that it tried. That was insane. My heart is still like in my throat. The music in this one is amazing. I really thought I was gonna lose. Welcome home, Tardy. Hi, Mom. I'm tired. I haven't had a lick of coffee this morning.